So after he had done that one, where it was obvious that he was intentionally doing that, the conversation eventually morphed into systemic oppression and talking about the war on drugs. In it, he originally said, I don't think that the war on drugs is racist.
The whole point of systemically racist structures is that they persevere and exist independent of any racial actors. The whole point.
That's along my point.
What? Yes.
I'm telling you that this policy was
disagree.
racist, regardless of people not being racist. You're agreeing with me.
No, I do agree with that. But I don't like it when it's phrased as just saying it's just racism or white supremacy.
It was like, excuse me? But it's a panel, and I can't hammer him on that point by myself because everyone else wants to talk and so on and so forth. And then he changes the conversation to saying something like, you're saying that race was the only cause of the war on drugs.
I'm just saying that to boil it all down to just race, and then to sit here and come out and be...
Nope, no one ever said that. Now, I must have said at least 10 times, as did another person who was on the panel, and we kept saying it over and over again. No, we're not saying it's the problem, we're saying A.
To just jump to race is certainly an element, but it's not the only element.
No, we're not saying it's the only problem, we're saying it's a large problem.
For one. Number two, I want to point out, like, and I get it, like, where you want to say that race isn't the whole story, and it never is the whole story, but it is a really large, probably predominantly compounding factor.
No, we're not saying, and he just, every time, yeah, but why do you keep saying it's the only problem?
The only problem I have is that when you frame all of it and just say it's racism or racial biases.
We spent, and I'm not exaggerating, an hour and a half of just nonstop comments saying, well, if you're saying race isn't the only problem, if you're saying race is the only problem, and every time we say it's not the only problem, we're not saying that. No one said it. In fact, I have a bunch of those clips, and I want you to just listen to how many times they're saying race is the only problem and how many times we're saying we've never said that and we're not saying that now.
Don't bring up with airheads on Twitter and everything. Like, I want to have a conversation with you amongst us. Nobody here is making those stupid claims. So
also, I want to point out really quickly, I was not making the statement that it was only race. That's the only factor that causes these things.
And I don't think synthesizing something down to like a single point is actually helpful at all. When you're speaking, it sounds like you're saying that no matter where you look, no matter what you test for, no matter what variables you change, race is always going to be the variable that matters. And that's just, it's not how studies work.
We aren't boiling everything down to race.
And those timestamps go over an hour of just dealing with that, only for us to finally come to the same page and then Destiny go.
Okay, I feel like we got dragged in here partially because you guys were saying that the war on drugs was 100% about race, and I disagreed with you.
Yeah, but Fanatiq said over and over again and start laughing because he knows he's distorting what I said.
Okay, I appreciate that, but like Fanatiq over and over again, and I don't know where you stand on this.
He knows he's not realistically actually engaging, right? Eventually that conversation dies, and so I'm like, okay, Destiny is just a bad actor. I see it now. I'm starting to see him for who he actually is. I'd say the final straw, the final interaction that Destiny and I had, there was a white grievance panel. In the white grievances panel, I think it was hosted by Mr. Girl and Dick Masterson and a bunch of other people, and they had one pick-me dude who just wasn't argue against them strong enough, so they had black representation. In that panel, they were saying all of this nonsense about reparations and
wait, hold on. Yeah. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong. I thought that redlining, it might have been like an approved practice, but at the end of the day, it was private banks and stuff that were making the decisions on who not to loan money to, no?
I would say if you're just going to start paying reparations like just across the board to black people, I think that would probably be like ridiculous.
If you get reparations or whatever, it's not because you were a slave, and it's not because you had a bad history because of slavery. It's because the government made a deal with you and went back on it. They broke. But if you're like a poor dude that lives in like a meth-fucked town, like a fucking trailer park, and you've got somebody talking that white privilege shit at you, you're gonna feel like, what the fuck are you talking about? Where the fuck is my privilege? I don't feel it, right?
Those people were given reparations due to what happened during the World War, right? Because they were wrong, like, criminally, but it wasn't like necessarily a financial transaction that was.
I think that was a little different though, because they were able to solve it like immediately. Like,
there can exist a white privilege on more of a statistical level, but a lot of the times that is misapplied to just an individual person. Like, if you're working a 9 to 5 and you're barely getting by on minimum wage, and then some like a lefty comes up and tells you that you have white privilege, then odds are you're going to take extreme offense to that, because you're thinking, what the hell did I get that I haven't earned, right? And it just harms discourse. It really is kind of a useless term at this point.
After that panel, Hunter Avalon had made a bunch of points and Destiny had made a bunch of points. I pulled Hunter Avalon to the side. Like, I ended up taking down notes of everything that he said, and I was like, hey, I want to address all those claims you were making. I want to address everything that you said. And he's like, okay. And I go through it.
If I said there is no intent, then yeah, that would have been incorrect. That would have been factually wrong. I think that what I meant to say, or what I definitely say now, is that it doesn't require intent. Again, I feel bad because I'm not trying to like walk back what I said on the panel, but I don't really remember, again, the context. Like, of course, there are going to be examples of individuals who are benefiting from white privilege.
So even though that person doesn't feel white privilege, would you say that they still have it?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely. White privilege is not determined by whether or not you feel like you have it.
You said this. There's no way that's right. He ends up walking it back. You said this. He walks that back. You said this. Well, I should clarify. Nope, that's not what you said. What you said was this. And by the time we're done, he walks back every single thing, every grievance that I had with. Destiny was also on that panel. And he had said a whole bunch of nonsense.
I think that would be a civil court matter, not like a policy of the U.S. government. Yeah, it's just when you start getting into like U.S. policies, I don't even know how you would even start to get into like who caused what wrong for what reason. It just seems like it would be so hard. Like the idea of just like black pride when there is no shared black experience in the United States.
And so it was like, okay, no, we're gonna call you out on that too. Now, up to this point, I've seen Destiny engage with people where he feels like they weren't being honest, and he takes notes and goes back, hits them with everything, fixes everything up, and then he's just like, yeah, exactly. So I knew I was right. Now, I'm not going in the same energy, but I'm like, oh, no, we're going to deal with every single one of these things because Destiny has a pretty large platform and he's pushing off all of these terrible talking points towards his largely white audience. And I know that I'm more informed than him on almost everything, especially regarding black issues. And the reason why this is so important is because what I realized was that even when we would have debates, he would act as if he knew what he was talking about when he didn't.
That's why it's so important. Wait, this is why you have to have my perspective. Any other perspective fails. Yeah. It has to be.
I don't have to have your perspective.
If you want to make the argument, it does.
So for example, at one point in our very first debate, he's saying, well, if you don't have camera evidence, then it didn't happen, or there's no proof, or so on and so forth, because I couldn't find the actual footage. And I explained to him, I was like, well, this is just as silly as when people said racial profiling wasn't happening before we had the receipts and proof of that. And he's like, well, we knew racial profiling was happening. I was like, yeah, but we didn't know it in the early 90s.
And I feel like this sounds eerily similar to when there were all of these complaints about police brutality before we started, or racial profiling before we started collecting the data, and it became undeniable because now we have a plurality of data.
We didn't know. And he's like, yeah, we did. We knew it. And it was like, no, actually, we didn't. And
only the data on racial profiling for decades, and we've known that it exists.
He just swore that he knew what he was talking about, and it's like, I know from my own personal experiences and from just my history with it and the data, there's just no possible way. So originally there were claims about like racial profiling, that police were just pulling black people over for no reason and so on and so forth. But at the time, we didn't have any data on that. The very first time we eventually came up with like the Traffic Act, whatever, which required police to keep data of every single time they pulled over a person. And then once they do that, then we're able to look at that data and say, see, so you guys are racial profiling.
Prior to that, before these laws were passed, when it was my parents and when it was my elder siblings, that's all we had was just word of mouth. They weren't keeping these statistics back in 1989.
Because prior to that, it was just an idea in our head. It's similar to how like Rodney King was one of the first extremely visible versions of police brutality that like galvanized people into riots, protests, and all of those things. Prior to that, it wasn't that we didn't know that it was happening. We knew it was happening and we claimed it was happening, but there was always a denial. No, it's not happening. No, you guys are making it up, etc., etc., etc. The thing that made Rodney King's situation so very particular was because he ended up driving his car on that chase to a gas station where the gas station had surveillance footage. The surveillance footage is how we saw, oh, you guys did brutalize the hell out of this man. Despite all the markings and things in his face, we saw the surveillance footage proved that they were absolutely ridiculous. And then once they did that, and they exonerated or acquitted all of those men, then it was like, wait, okay, so that's what created the riot. But we knew it was happening, but now we had evidence. Now we have cell phone footage to prove that it's happening so regular. So when I made the statement, like in the same way that we didn't know about racial profiling, and he's like, yeah, we did. And I'm like, we didn't know about it in the early 90s. Yeah, we did. We knew it way before that. He's just uninformed. So what we have is the Traffic Stop Statistics Act of 1997, which is HR 118. The whole purpose of that was to begin collecting data from traffic stops to determine what the cause of it was and what the outcome of us to determine if things were racially motivated. This was necessary for us to get the data where we can now learn about the veil of darkness, where once it starts getting towards evening, dusk, or places where you can't tell with the race of people, all of a sudden disparity in pullovers and traffic stops start disappearing. It was just kind of insane because, originally he was claiming that this is not it. And I knew, of course, that it was. I just have lifetime incidents where I recognized that this was a thing for myself, because they would always put me in handcuffs in the back of their car whenever they would do it. Or I remember driving down the road and the cop pulled up behind us with my dad and his friend and a bunch of my siblings, and we're in the car. And I remember they mentioned the police officer, and I was sitting at the very front in the middle of the car, and I went to look back over my shoulder, and my dad like kind of elbowed me like, hey, look forward. If you look at them, then it's going to make them pull us over. I might have been 9 years old at the time, maybe. I would say I was 9 years old at the time. I knew that it existed. He didn't know that it existed. The problem is he always assumes that he knows, or he'll just straight out lie. So after all of those things and all the stuff that he stated on the White Grievance panel, I decided, okay, I'm finally going to have a conversation with Destiny.